Valve has stopped trying. A doomed solution. An abdication of responsibility. The worst possible solution. Valve's new policy on which games are allowed on their platform has elicited these and other responses from mainstream media and game media alike. But is Valve a money-hoarding company with no morals? Or are they a shrewd business that's able to understand customer needs and the state of tech companies at this time? That's what we'll talk about today in the first episode of AP Gaming News. Welcome to AP Gaming News, where I pick a recent topic, event, or scandal in gaming to discuss, analyze, and give my opinion on. And of course, at the end of it, I want to hear your opinion. I love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment down below with what you think of today's topic. So let's go ahead and get into it. What happened? Valve, or Steam, is currently under fire for what content is allowed on their platform. There are a couple recent scandals. The first, of course, is the school shooting simulator that was briefly released on their platform. It has now been taken down because the developer is, well, they're a constant thorn in the side of Steam. There's also been the recent sexual content issue. There was some backlash over what kind of sexual content Steam allowed on their platform. A lot of the game media was actually concerned about censorship. Now, there's been a recent blog post by Valve. Valve seems to have kind of flipped their minds a little bit over these recent controversies, and they say that they're going to be opening up their platform to all developers. There's not going to be any restrictions as to the kind of content that they'll be allowing on the platform. They're just going to go ahead and let it be open and let the players decide. There are two caveats to that. First, they're not going to allow any illegal content, so content that's obviously is breaking any laws. And secondly, they're not going to allow any content that's obvious trolling. So basically, in their blog post, Valve makes it very clear they're going to host just about anything, but that doesn't mean that they agree with everything that they're going to be putting on the platform, nor do they necessarily endorse it. So, what is the response? First of all, Steam's response to this decision is that they're going to offer more tools to the users to allow them to filter and tag and be active members of the community when it comes to these different games. Second, Steam is also going to ask for more information from developers so that they can better tag and understand what's going to be in the game. And finally, the users, the players, are able to filter out what they don't want and curate their own experience, make it a personalized experience, and be able to filter out the things that they don't want. The response from players? About 75 to 80% of players are saying they're fine with this decision. They said that they'll use the tools, they'll use the filters, and there's been positivity towards this decision. And of course, there's the game media. And the game media, as we saw from the quotes above, their response to this is that this is basically the apocalypse of Steam. That Steam are a bunch of moral degenerates, they've abdicated responsibility, and they've decided to become non-participants in a so-called culture war. Before we get into a few other things, I want to make a couple obvious statements. Just statements of fact to help frame this discussion. First of all, Steam is a company, and as a company, it's privately owned, and it's beholden to its owners and its investors. They can do whatever they want within the bounds of their law. They are not required to make certain changes. They're not required to bend to the whims of their users or to the game media or anyone else. As far as the players are adults. They've got rational capabilities. They're able to choose what games that they purchase. No one is forcing them to like certain games, to enjoy certain games, to buy certain games. And finally, the game media are free to criticize any decision any which way they like. So everyone is basically free to do whatever they want. Why is this such a controversy? Well, some people have brought up a couple different concerns with this decision to open up the platform from Steam. Issue number one is that this is going to open up a flood of terrible games. By allowing any developers that create games that aren't obvious trolling or illegal, this opens up the way for poor quality games, asset flips, games that don't even have an exe file that allow them to run. The argument is that there's going to be a flood of new games that are just low quality and that we're going to have to filter through. The second concern that people have with this is the idea of user curation and rating, voting, etc. They believe that we already rely too heavily on Steam users to curate their own responses. There's the issue of toxicity. The Steam community can be toxic at times. There's also the issue of review bombing. Review bombing has been used in the past to allow players the ability to express their discomfort, their dislike at some decisions that large game companies have made. Probably the most well-known recent one is GTA 5 and the modding controversy and the review bombing that happened there. Issue number two, user curation and this rating voting system, which can be unreliable, especially given the fickle nature of human beings. Third, and finally, there's the issue of hateful, racist, sexist content and sexist games, racist games. The recent school shooting simulator is a good example of this. This decision to open up the platform to all developers means that it opens up the possibility to games that are explicitly racist, that are xenophobic against other cultures, that are sexist and maybe discriminate, which is very true. This is definitely a possibility. The question is then, is this still the right decision? Is this what we want? That's the facts. Time for my opinions. So why do I think that Steam and Valve have made the right decision? So I'm going to go ahead and address each of these different concerns that have been brought up. First of all, the flood of bad games. I hate to break it to you guys, but here's the reality. There will always be bad games. Secondly, there are already bad games out there. The reality is that having some Steam content curation has not stopped or really even slowed the number of shovelware games of asset flips that have existed. Secondly, what makes a game bad is a highly subjective decision. A game does not need to be an asset flip to be bad. There are plenty of bad games out there that are AAA games, and there are plenty of very, very good games out there that are made by one dude in his basement. Stardew Valley is a great example of this. It's one guy who made the entire game by himself. On the flip side, you've got AAA studios with 500, 1,000 people working on games, and they're terrible. They come out like junk. A game doesn't have to be an asset flip in order to be a poor game. The second issue is that of user curation and rating and voting and all that sort of stuff. I would have to say that user curation and voting is the best solution we have anyways. First of all, having Steam curate and moderate their own content is actually a little bit of conflict of interest. It's a conflict of interest because companies could pay Steam in order to promote their bad game and basically shove out their competitors on good games. I would rather have all games presented to me and allow me to make the decision based on my filters rather than have the possibility of Steam promoting certain games that are bad over games that are good. There's a conflict of interest there, which I'm not comfortable with. Secondly, give power to the player. Give power to the buyer, the purchaser. This is almost always the correct decision. Let the buyer speak with their money. Let them drive the market. Let them show what we want. Let us make the decisions on how to spend our own money. The third concern is hateful content, sexist comment, etc. Well, the first question that comes up with this is, who decides what's hateful? Who decides that? Who gets to be that arbiter of justice? Who gets to be that arbiter of what's culturally acceptable and what's not? Who draws that line? First of all, you've got conflicting cultures within each of the different countries that Steam operates in. Who decides what's okay when it comes to those conflicting cultures? Who decides what's better and what's worse? Who decides what's acceptable and what's not? Secondly, games, especially comedy games and satire games, are starting to grow pretty quickly. When it comes to satire, that's even more subjective. Who decides what is satire and what isn't? Who decides where the line in comedy goes too far and where it's just right? Again, comedy is a highly subjective area. What's funny to some people is not funny to others. What's comedy to some is offensive to others. It's another area where Steam, frankly, can't make that decision. They don't have the ability to make that decision on scale. Finally, it doesn't matter if something makes you uncomfortable. That's not a reason to censor it. Me being uncomfortable with pornography doesn't mean that I should have the right to tell other people that they're not allowed to look at it. That's a decision that's on them. I don't like horror really that much, but that doesn't mean that I should allow horror games to be censored. I should allow other people to make that decision. Finally, there's a couple other issues, or a couple other responses to these concerns. First of all, the alternative of Steam curating their own content is unscalable to begin with. The reality is that this blog post is kind of just a blunt statement of reality that Steam cannot handle the scale of games that's currently operating. They're not going to be able to do that in the future. The number of games that are being released on Steam has been growing exponentially each year anyways. And so this is going to continue to be an issue whether or not Steam curates it or not. They really have not been able to keep up with the pace already, so this is kind of just a statement of reality. This isn't really a news break. It's them being blunt about it. With the issue of scalability, you've already got too many games. Now, if you're going to have Steam curate every game, they need to check every minor update. Games are living, breathing pieces of software, and one simple update can drastically change the tone of a game. It can drastically change what a game looks like, if it's acceptable in some people's eyes and not in others. And so this is, again, a real scalable issue. For every game, for every piece of DLC, for each minor update that comes out, someone would have to look at those updates and flag them and see if they're going to be acceptable in their country. This brings up the next issue. Steam operates in a number of different countries with a number of different cultures and subcultures in their regions. in order to make this scalable, basically they would have to have a person in each subculture of each region that they operate in and look at every game, look at every update, look at every DLC, and decide if it's acceptable for their subculture or not. And again, who decides who gets to be that person, and what if they make a bad decision? It's not scalable. Finally, this decision is the right decision because users and developers are treated like capable adults. They're treated like people who can make rational decisions on what's best for them, and they can make rational decisions on where to spend their time, where to spend their money, what to filter in, what to filter out. It really is the best decision. Again, you're giving power to the player. Not only that, but in the blog post, Steam has said that they're going to require more transparency on the side of all parties. They're going to require more transparency from game developers on what kind of content is in their game already, which again is another very good thing. So transparency and power to the player are almost always the correct decision. I was going to talk about that analogy of Facebook and Google taking a stand. Let's talk about that right now. For starters, Facebook and YouTube, the analogy between their responses to curating their content versus the response of curating content by Steam, it's not a good comparison to begin with. And I'll get to that. Let's start with YouTube. YouTube is having a really hard time just because of the sheer scale of how much video is put onto their platform each minute. It's over 400 hours of video put on their platform each minute. Frankly, machine learning has done a terrible job when it comes to the algorithm, when it comes to deciding what's acceptable, what's not, with a static video. Games are much more complex. Games are active and breathing and living pieces of software. The result of trying to scale machine learning in order to operate, in order to curate what's on Steam would be an absolute disaster. Secondly, when it comes to a video, the big difference is that a video can be tagged as adult, it can be tagged as explicit, it can be tagged as something that's inappropriate, and then that video on YouTube's platform is stuck. It's stuck with that tag unless, it gets reviewed by a human reviewer, it goes through a petition process, that sort of thing, but the video itself is static. Again, a game's content can be updated with new content, can be inserted with new text, new programs, new systems, new mechanics. Every game update would have to be curated by Steam. They'd have to review every update through a number of different cultural lenses before pushing it out to the appropriate cultures and making sure that it's quote unquote okay for those people to look at it. It's simply not a good comparison. And again, the scalability issues that YouTube is facing is going to be even harder to deal with on the Steam side simply because of the nature of a game versus the nature of a static video. As far as the comparison between Facebook and Steam, first of all, Facebook is dealing with a couple different issues. Facebook is trying to combat fake news and prides itself on allowing users to express their beliefs, despite the fact that there's actually significant evidence that they are suppressing conservative speech. Fake news is a problem, but that's something that needs to be addressed from the user side. We need to overcome fake news with teaching people to be digitally literate. The other part is that Facebook is in hot water with the government because of its use of user data. The fact that it allowed user data to be captured and used in ethically questionable ways. Steam is not in that same boat. So the comparison between Facebook and Steam it's apples to oranges, really. In the end, YouTube and Facebook, they're in the eye of the government because they're messing with private data and they're censoring people's speech while claiming to be neutral. Now, as private companies, they're able to censor speech however they want. That doesn't mean that I have to support them. If they decide to censor speech, that's their prerogative. But if they decide to censor speech while claiming to be open and neutral public forums, that's an issue. That's just bold-faced lying. Frankly, when it comes down to it, Steam doesn't want to be involved in that kind of debate. They don't want to be involved in that kind of issues. And who would? Who wants to be audited by the government? I think that Steam has made the correct decision by allowing all games so that they can actually claim that they're an open public forum, obviously except for illegal content or just straight up trolling content. Steam has actually made the correct decision. They've taken the steps to do what YouTube and Facebook and Google are actually claiming to do. They're actually allowing themselves to be open public forums and allow the users and the players to make the decisions on what they want to see and what they don't want to see. So Facebook and YouTube, not a good analogy when it comes to how Steam is going to be operating their business model. The best analogy is actually Amazon. Amazon gives power to its users. It allows its users to rate products. It allows their users to give feedback and reviews and allows them to ask questions and post those questions on the product page there. The user base informs one another of bad purchases or bad experiences that they had, and it allows them to inform one another of good experiences and good alternatives. If we have the correct tools with Steam, we're going to see the user base and the player base become more literate. They're going to become more knowledgeable, become more empowered, and make better decisions. Again, Amazon doesn't really care what it sells. The people that work at Amazon probably don't agree with everything that they sell on their store page. Steam is basically the Amazon of digital games. And they give the buyer more resources, they give the buyer more power and knowledge in order to make a good decision. This is why Amazon and Steam are both successful. They give power to the purchaser. The toxicity and review bombing of products on Steam, that's a community problem. That's really kind of a separate issue. But at the same time, the new tools and the new products that Steam has promised us through this blog post might actually resolve a lot of those community problems. Amazon treats its business model the same way that Steam is going to be treating their business model, and no one bats an eye at Amazon. No one says anything about Amazon. I think that that's the best analogy. Again, the business models are basically going to operate in the same way. If you think different, let me know. So before we wrap it up, I wanted to deal with one little assumption that I saw in all of these articles that are linked below. The articles that I read, they all seem to have the same theme, and this theme is this underlying assumption that a company has to make a moral stand on certain issues. I really think that that is a false assumption. It's okay when a company is neutral. They don't have to have a stand on every political scandal, on every political topic, on every social issue. This honestly extends to just about everything in the public square. When it comes to celebrities, I don't care about Matt Damon's views on gerrymandering. I just care if he puts out a good movie and he does good acting. I don't care about LeBron's political views. I just want to see if he makes that shot or if he has a cool dunk or something like that. I don't care about sports figures' political activism. I just want to know that they play sports well. In the same arena, I don't care about Steam's political leanings on taxation or immigration reform or social security or anything like that. All I care about is that they sell me good games, that they sell them to me at a reasonable price, and that they give me the ability to make informed decisions. Not every company needs to make a stand on issues. Companies are not required to be activists for the environment. They're not required to be activists for civil rights or for gender equality or for any of those topics that are going on in culture right now. Now, obviously, these companies like Steam, like Valve, they must follow the laws that we have regarding those issues, but they don't have to be activists out there screaming their opinions on these social issues. They just have to follow the laws. In conclusion, I believe Valve has made the right choice, especially given the culture war that's occurring right now, and the culture war that's occurring due to censorship and user data, content and curation in tech companies and social media. Given the landscape of that, they've basically said hands off, and I think that's the correct decision. I think that Valve has made the right decision given the fact that games are not going to be scalable when it comes to the games themselves, the minor updates that are put out, the DLC, the add-ons, all that sort of stuff. There's too many decisions for them to make when it comes to all these games, especially given the fact that they are living, breathing pieces of software. There's too much for them to do. It's not scalable. Valve has made the right decision not to become some sort of arbiter of cultural acceptance in all the different countries and subcultures that they cater to. They're probably, I don't know the exact number, but they're probably in close to 100 countries. And that means a lot of countries and a lot of cultural expectations, a lot of subcultures within each of those different countries. That's just too much to cater to. I would say that Valve has also made the right decision in that they give the power to the customer and they treat them with dignity and assume the competence on the part of the player, on the part of the purchaser. Giving power to the purchaser, giving power to the player and assuming their dignity and their competence is almost always the right business decision. Give them tools, give them knowledge, give them information, and then give them the products to choose from and allow them to make those decisions. And finally, I would say that game media are falling prey to the same trap that traditional media are falling prey to. And they're basically taking this wise business choice, they're politicizing it, and they're doing it so that they can get views. They're doing it so that they can get clicks, that they can get ad revenue from all the ads that are on the pages. And I think that they're doing it just to kind of stir up controversy before E3 happens, which is actually happening today, and just trying to get some clicks and ad revenue in before they have a bevy of content coming up next week. That is my take. That's my analysis and my opinion on what happened. Now it's your turn. Your turn to comment. Let me know what you think. Tell me what you decided. Tell me what you take on this controversy. Do you even think it is a controversy? So let me know down below in the comments. If it's your first time here, so glad to have you. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Check out some of the other series on my channel, and we'll see you guys again soon here on AP Games.